Hey, New City. It's a great day so far here, and looking forward to tonight in Warner Robins. And just wanted to run back through things from the sermon. It's maybe weird to hear this, but we're on this 3 week, kicking off 3 weeks on stewardship, and I actually enjoy it. I enjoy talking about being good stewards of all that God has given us. One of the things that God has given us and He expects us to steward is our finances. The reason that I love talking about this is because primarily, I think it's because our giving really reflects our worship. Our giving reflects our love of God and ultimately our love of people as well. And I would say that the reason that we are not good givers and we have such difficulty in being generous stewards of the resources that God has given us is most often because we're less concerned about God and less concerned about His mission, and we're less concerned about the people around us than we are about ourselves. And so at the heart of giving, at the heart of being a good steward, whether we're talking about our finances or our time, our resources, our talents, our spiritual gifts, whatever it is, at the heart of not being a good steward and a generous giver of ourselves and resources is worship. And we have idols before us that prevent us from being the people that God wants us to be. And so it's challenging for me, it's convicting for me to read this particular passage and to dwell on it and to think about my own giving and the things that I do and my family does. So hopefully it will be challenging and convicting for you as well, not to heap guilt on you, but to lead you to pursue Christ and to worship Him more and to really dig deep into the heart and see what are the idols of my life that come before worshiping God, that come before loving Him and loving people. So we look at this passage, 2 Corinthians, an amazing passage. 2 Corinthians chapter 8, it's verses 1 through 9. And what we see is Paul encouraging the Corinthian church to give to meet the needs of the Judean believers who were suffering, and they were in great need. Paul uses two examples to encourage their giving. The first example is the church in Macedonia, who was very impoverished, who was suffering themselves. In fact, Paul makes it seem as though they had no expectation for this church to give because this church had great need of its own. And yet, in the midst of their suffering and in the midst of their poverty, we find them begging to give to meet the needs of the Judean church. And so Paul describes their giving this way. Paul describes it as joyful. They gave joyfully. They gave willingly. It was something that they wanted to do. And they gave sacrificially. They gave beyond their needs, not just from the overflow or the extra that they had, but they actually did without so that they could help meet the needs of others. And they gave eagerly, begging Paul, let us give, here is what we want to give. What we see today is that they gave from a heart of worship, right? Because they had given themselves to the Lord. So it was from this worship that overflowed this generosity of the heart. They loved God, and so they wanted to be generous with what God had given to them, even though what they had was not abundant. They weren't wealthy people at all. So that's challenging for me to say I want to be like them, to give abundantly, to give joyfully, willingly, to give sacrificially, right, to meet the needs of other people, not because I have a lot, but because I love God, because I've given myself to Him. They also obviously love people, right? And those are the two greatest commands: love God and love people. They loved the people that they were giving to. They excelled, Paul said, as he encouraged the Corinthians excelled in all of these different areas: faith and speech and knowledge, in earnestness, all of that. And what Paul is encouraging them now to do is to excel in loving the Judean Christians, right? Excel in your love. And the evidence that you love other people is that you will give generously. So if you're not doing something to meet the needs of other people, if you're not giving, then what that is an indication of, Paul's saying, is that you really don't love them. You can say that you love them all you want, but if there's no evidence, then the love isn't real, right? And so what we see from them, from the Macedonians, in their example to give, is that they loved God and they loved people. They were the first example for giving that Paul presents to the church in Corinth. The second is Jesus, who gave himself for all of us, right? Who became poor, Paul says, on our behalf. And so Jesus and the gospel and his sacrifice of himself, giving of himself fully and freely, we could say joyfully, willfully, sacrificially, eagerly. Jesus met all of that in giving himself for us. That's the gospel. Jesus lived for us. Jesus suffered for us. Jesus died for us. Jesus was raised for us so that he could accomplish for us what we could never accomplish on our own. And so the two examples that Paul gives greatly are one, the Macedonians who loved God and loved people, and two is Jesus, who loved us and gave himself up for us, out of his great love for us. And so giving, we see, flows from this love and worship. Ultimately, if we love God, we will obey him. If we are his, we are being conformed to the image of Jesus. Jesus was a sacrificial giver, and he gave out of love. And so guess what? If we reflect him, we're going to be sacrificial givers who give out of love. And so giving is all tied back to worship. Giving is all tied back to our heart and having a heart that loves God and loves people. And we talked as well about several of the reasons why we don't give. Some of the obstacles to that, it's my money, I earned it, I'm up to my ears in debt, I don't have enough to give, and other reasons too. And if you need those, go back and listen. Those are legitimate reasons, but they all stem from a heart generally that is focused on self. It's my money. So what about loving other people? What about loving God? You see, it's a concern for self. I'm up to my ears in debt. Why do you have so much debt? Maybe because you live beyond your means, trying to attain more and more and more for yourself instead of looking out for the good of others. I don't have enough to give. Probably, if we look at it, you do. So all of those things often point to us just loving ourselves more than we love God, loving ourselves more than we love other people. So it's a huge challenge. It's very convicting. This week should be a week that we examine our heart first and foremost to see, do we worship God? Do we love God? And if we do, the overflow of that will pour out of us in generous giving. All right, guys, love you. And hey, here was the question that I started with, and a question that I was asked. If someone looked at your checkbook or your check account today, your balance, and saw where all of your money went to, would they know that you love God? Would they know that you're a Christian and a worshiper of him because of your giving patterns and where your money is spent? Ouch. Yeah, that one gets me. Love you guys. Hope you have a great week. Please let this soak in, not from a duty perspective, but from a perspective of worship. Do I love money? Do I love self? Do I love my possessions more than I love God and people? All right. See you soon.